Sunflower Electric Power Corporation, cooperative members working together to generate power so you can enjoy the benefits of life in central and western Kansas. Sunflower Electric Power Corporation, energy done right.
Hello and good evening. Welcome to a live debate between the candidates of the 119th District of the Kansas House of Representatives here on Smoky Hills Public Television. I am your moderator, Dr. Jay Steinmetz, Assistant Professor of Political Science at Fort Hays State University. We have our two candidates via Skype. On the screen, you will see our incumbent, Republican Brad Ralph, and on the screen, you will see our challenger, Democrat Jan Scoggins. Welcome both of you, and thank you for being part of this debate. The format of the debate will be as follows. Each candidate will have a 90-second opening statement. We will then go through a list of questions, and each candidate will be given 60 seconds to answer. The candidate who goes first will alternate as we go through the questions. Each candidate will have a 90-second closing statement. The candidates have not seen the questions in advance. Of course, we encourage civility and a healthy, robust debate. Being the challenger, we have decided that Democrat Jan Scoggins will go first with her opening statement. Mrs. Scoggins, you have 90 seconds.
Thank you very much. Dodge City is my home, and I live here. I've been very dedicated to serving our community, and my leadership style is one that includes everyone. I listen very carefully to every viewpoint. During my years of service as Executive Director of the Crisis Center, I provided advocacy for domestic violence and sexual assault victims. I led the way for the establishment of Meadowlark House Child Advocacy Center. I was selected as the very first long-term care ombudsman as a voice for our loved ones in the nursing homes. I served 6 years as a Dodge City Commissioner, and I listened to you. My priorities include Medicaid expansion, dependable and affordable broadband, educational funding and opportunities, and I'm sure we will hit on these during our discussion. My public and community service resulted in me twice being awarded the prestigious Woman of the Year Award, first by the Professional and Business Women, next by Dodge City Area Women's Chamber. I've been honored with other awards, including Howard Moses Public Service Award. I have a unique ability to work with every personality in a variety of situations to bring about a result that's acceptable for all. I will use these same unique leadership views for every point in Topeka, and I will be your voice in Topeka. I'm looking forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mrs. Scoggins. Your time is up. And now, Representative Ralph, your opening statement. You have 90 seconds.
Thank you, Dr. Steinmetz, and good evening. I'm Representative Brad Ralph, and I represent the 119th District in the Kansas House of Representatives. I have had the honor and privilege of that representation for the last 4 years, and I'm asking that you send me back to Topeka to continue to work on your behalf. I'm a product of the Dodge City Public Schools and a graduate of the St. Mary of Plains College. After law school, my family and I returned to Dodge City, where I have practiced law since. Every year of my tenure in the legislature has been marked with some unforeseen event, circumstance, or challenge for the state of Kansas. Special sessions, a mid-session change of governor, a newly elected governor, school finance issues, and now the COVID epidemic. In these times of uncertainty, it's critical that Western Kansas retain voices in the legislature that are heard and trusted. My service on the Appropriations, Commerce, and Judiciary committees has provided Western Kansas a trusted voice in the committee rooms that have specifically generated some of the most critical pieces of legislation to be considered in that time period. The most recent legislation regarding issues surrounding the COVID business shutdowns, STAR bond legislation, and the Ike transportation program, to name just a few. It's my sincere desire to continue providing quality representation to the residents of the 119th District. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Representative Ralph. And now we're going to a series of questions. These candidates have not viewed the questions in advance, and we are going to begin with Representative Ralph to answer a question. Again, you have 60 seconds to answer. Our first question, what specifically can the Kansas legislature do to support the immigrant populations in Kansas and ensure a growing and healthy population in the state?
I think in many instances, it starts with simply an attitude of recognizing and acknowledging the tremendous commitment that the immigrant populations and the diverse ethnicities, what they offer to our communities and what they are already offering to our communities, particularly since we're speaking now of the 119th District and Dodge City. I think so many times, too, it comes from a matter of just our language and how we conduct ourselves in Topeka to acknowledge the fact that we want folks to be in our communities and that we welcome them to be here. Locally, I've always been very proud of our city and how we embrace our immigrant populations and take them into the community, and how those populations have offered themselves up and contributed to the community. So I think mostly within the legislature, it becomes a matter of us just acknowledging in what we say and how we say it to those communities.
Okay, thank you, Representative Ralph. And now the same question for Mrs. Scoggins, our challenger. What specifically can the Kansas legislature do to support the immigrant populations in Kansas and ensure a growing and healthy population in the state?
Well, Ford County and Dodge City is at least 25% immigrant population at the present time. We need to do what we can and work also into the federal government to do something to make a better path for the immigrants to become citizens. I'm very supportive of DACA. I'm also very pleased that Ford County and Dodge City, and this was during my time as a commissioner, we do have a place now locally for the immigrants to go in and work on their citizenship. We have a history in Dodge where we used to have the Mexican village, and we no longer have that. That was before the Spanish students were allowed to even come to our public schools. That is taken care of at this point, and yes, we need to make sure that we embrace all of our population, including our immigrants. They are our workforce.
Thank you, Mrs. Scoggins. And now our second question, Mrs. Scoggins, we'll go first with this question. What is your position on the issue of abortion, and what do you think is the proper role of the Kansas legislature in dealing with this issue?
Thank you for this question, because it is a very emotionally charged question, and it has many different options. As a representative, it would be my job 100% to listen to all of you and to get your input. Just as an ombudsman, I would listen to the resident and then represent their wills. I have 2 adopted family members. My very best friend is a result of an incest relationship. Her grandfather had raped her mother. She was from an unwed children's home. I cannot imagine life without these 2. However, we also have to say, what in the world do we do when it's a little 11-year-old girl that's skipping off to a birthday party, forgot something and turned around and went back and was brutally raped and became impregnated? So we have to look at everything. It's a complex issue.
Time's up,
and
Mrs.
all
Scoggins.
views must be heard.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your answer. And now the same question for Representative Ralph. What is your position on the issue of abortion, and what do you think is the proper role of the Kansas legislature in dealing with this issue?
As the issue presently exists for the Kansas legislature, and as folks, anyone who followed my voting record last year, I supported the value of them both amendment in the legislature, specifically in relation to what the Kansas legislature can do. The recent decision by the Kansas Supreme Court identifying a right to abortion within our Kansas Constitution, I believe, was a surprise, a shock to some and a surprise to most everyone that was found there after this amount of time. I think at this point in time, it's appropriate for the proposed amendment to be submitted to the voters of this state, for them to weigh in and tell us and decide from the populace whether that is an accurate decision by the Supreme Court or not, and whether we want our state constitution to be interpreted in that fashion. So I think it very clearly should go back to the voters.
Thank you, Representative Ralph. And now our third question here. You will begin, Representative Ralph. Do you support the passage of a bill legalizing medical marijuana? Why or why not?
I always love the questions that talk about just a general concept of something passing, because one of the things that we find out very quickly in the legislature is that if you're asked about an issue, then when it actually ends up on your desk in written form with all of its parts, there are good things and there are bad things about that. Generally speaking, I would be comfortable considering medical marijuana, but I'm highly skeptical of our ability to draft that legislation right now to make it work and make it work correctly. I think we've seen over the past several years that sometimes legislation takes some time. It needs to percolate for people to realize how we can make it done appropriately. We ran into that a little bit 2 years ago when we dealt with cannabinoid oil. So at this point in time, I would be willing to look at the legislation, but I wouldn't be willing to commit to it at this moment without reading through it.
Okay, thank you for your answer, Representative Ralph. And the same question for Mrs. Scoggins. Do you support the passage of a bill legalizing medical marijuana? Why or why not?
I think, yes, that I would support it. Of course, it would, again, have to depend on how it is written. I think we would want to certainly include law enforcement in this. We do have the situation of a neighboring state that has the medical marijuana. And in driving through our state, where does our law enforcement stand in working and answering if someone has their medical marijuana with them? I think it is time for us, yes, to look at legislation and to make sure that we bring all parties to the forefront to make sure that it does and is a workable solution for Kansas and those needing the medical marijuana. Yes, I would support having some legislation of some sort. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Scoggins. And now our next question, and Mrs. Scoggins will go first. Do you support Medicaid expansion? Why or why not? How does the issue of Medicaid expansion affect residents in western Kansas?
Thank you so much. Yeah, I 100% support Medicaid expansion. In fact, I went to the very first forum on Medicaid expansion, which was some years back. It was held by the Alliance for Healthy Kansans. Medicaid expansion will lead to a prosperous community. For Dodge City and Ford County alone, it will give health coverage to over 1,800 individuals between 18 and 64. It also is projected to bring another 316 jobs and provide local health coverage. Our community would certainly have an economic impact on this. It is anticipated that it would bring approximately $12 million to our economy through Medicaid expansion in Ford County for these 1,800 individuals who do not have insurance. This is something we need to do, definitely.
Time's up. Thank you, Mrs. Scoggins, for your answer. And now the same question for Representative Ralph. Do you support Medicaid expansion? Why or why not? How does the issue of Medicaid expansion affect residents in western Kansas?
Yes, I support Medicaid expansion, and I have voted to pass Medicaid expansion in the Kansas legislature. I ran on that issue 4 years ago when I first came into the legislature, and I still support Medicaid expansion. As much as anything, this is straightforward an economic issue for me. The federal match of dollars that Ford County, western Kansas could obtain through this, in essence, and hate to use the colloquial, but it becomes a no-brainer for me. We talk about in many instances how important tourism is to our communities. Bringing those dollars, those health dollars into our communities will turn over and over and over again. It will be nothing but an economic benefit for this community, and I will continue to support Medicaid expansion in the years to come.
Thank you, Representative Ralph. And now we'll move on to our next question, and this is for Representative Ralph to answer first. What specific policies do you support that can protect the elderly in Kansas?
I think at this particular point, one of the first things we can do, and I've worked fairly significantly with the Attorney General's office in the state of Kansas and through their Consumer Protection Division to try to keep in place at the forefront, if you will, protections for senior citizens in relation to fraud that might fall upon them. It's important for the legislature to be working with all the different branches of government, all the different elected officials, and in that capacity and through my position on the Judiciary Committee, I've had an opportunity to be involved in not only the consideration, but in many instances drafting of legislation. In this past session, we're trying to work on a little bit of some legislation out of the Attorney General's office that would provide for some private action in relation to seeking out fraudulent and abuses. But obviously we ran out of time, but I'm hoping that we'll be able to put that back on the front burner in this next session.
Okay, thank you, Representative Ralph. And now the same question for Mrs. Scoggins. What specific policies do you support that can protect the elderly in Kansas?
Well, having served 15 years as a long-term care ombudsman for 60 different nursing homes out here in Southwest Kansas, yes, we need to make sure that we have some protective legislation in place on our elder abuse, economic abuse. We have the ombudsman program that is for those in long-term care facilities, but we do not have any sort of an advocate that would be for those living independently. And I think that a program that would be similar to the ombudsman program for long-term care facilities to be available for our elderly that are living independently or in a community housing setting. This is the way you advocate for what they need. That allows you to be in there and oversee the situations that are always coming forth. I worked with families, I worked with doctors, I worked with the DONs, and I worked with the residents. It needs to be identified.
Time's up, Mrs. Scoggins. Thank you very much for your answer. And now we'll go to our next question. Mrs. Scoggins will answer first. How well do you think the Kansas state government responded to the COVID-19 outbreak? What was missing in their response?
I think they did the best they could under the circumstances that were given. They did the shutdown. I supported Governor Kelly in what she did, but we also have such a wide variety of communities, and we have a wide variety of communities, rural versus the large cities. We did listen to the people, and I know we have hot spots that are coming up, but in a small rural community, they function differently than in a large city. So I think at this point, our governor did what she could. We are always able to hear, and it's streamed down to where we know what's going on. If we just wear our masks, that helps a lot. And I wish we could have done more sooner nationwide.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Scoggins. And now the same question for Representative Ralph. How well do you think the Kansas state government responded to the COVID-19 outbreak? What was missing in their response?
At this point, I'm going to have to say that I believe that the ultimate response that resulted from our special session was a very good example of cooperative efforts between not only the Senate and the House, but the governor's office. And I'll claim some credit for that, because during those 48 hours, I spent a significant amount of time actually involved in the conversations and the drafting of House Bill 2016 as it resulted in that final coalition of folks agreeing to how we would respond at that point in time. At this, I think history will give us a better sense of what the governor's response was, but I think the legislature in those moments showed what actually could happen when you were willing to have the conversations and consult and draft those. Actually, the final result of House Bill 2016 I was proud of in regard to all of the different issues and all of the different stakeholders that were acknowledged and considered in that, and I think it was a pretty good piece of legislation under the circumstances.
Okay, thank you, Representative Ralph. And now we'll move on to our next question. Representative Ralph, you will answer first. Is the legislature the appropriate governmental body to lead an emergency response? Or is emergency response better suited for the office of the governor?
At this point, I wish the audience actually could have listened in to our 6 days of hearings. I was appointed to serve on a joint committee in relation to evaluating the Kansas Emergency Management Act, which was one of the things that was talked about by all parties, the governor, the House, and the Senate, that we needed to take another look at our emergency management statutes. During those 6 days of hearings, we heard evidence and took testimony acknowledging the fact that in many instances for natural disasters, the governor's response is the appropriate place for those things to happen, tornadoes, floods, and the like. In a circumstance such as a pandemic that exists for a longer period of time, it is imperative that we find a way to get the legislature back in session and back to a position where they can be involved in the actual management of an emergency situation. This has demonstrated to us that those are some small gaps we have in our current statutes. Those need to be addressed because the legislature, both the House and the Senate, need to be back involved.
Time's up. Thank you, Representative Ralph, for your answer. And now the same question for Mrs. Scoggins. Is the legislature the appropriate governmental body to lead an emergency response? Or is emergency response better suited to the office of the governor?
I like the idea of the office of the governor responding to any emergency that we have. I think that the governor's office is the one that has access. Yes, to get input from the legislature is important, and we need to have statutes to do so. But I firmly believe that the governor's office is the one that should lead and head and bring all parties to the table to find out what's going on. But we need a single source, and it needs to be at the governor's office.
Okay, thank you for your answer, Mrs. Scoggins. And we'll move on to our next question here. Mrs. Scoggins will go first. What steps should government take to mitigate against a second wave of COVID-19 outbreaks this winter?
Oh, well, that's a hard one. I would like to see us go ahead and take the steps that we need to do. We need to shut down where things need to be shut down. We have got to take care of things, and we need to respect one another by following the advice of the scientists, following the advice of the physicians and the medical profession, and wear our masks and take care of one another and be respectful for the fact that this is a very dangerous disease. And we need to simply follow the directions and then get it taken care of. So yes, I would like to see us follow directions, have a unified way of fighting this, and work with the physicians, with the medical community that says this is how it should be done. It should come from the governor's office.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Scoggins. And now the same question for Representative Ralph. What steps should state government take to mitigate against a second wave of COVID-19 outbreaks this winter?
I think that what can happen from this at the state level is continuing the response under several of the governor's current executive orders in relation to some of the extensions that are in place and some of the support that is provided to communities that need it. But I will continue to take the position that the actual response to COVID, whether it is a second wave or a third wave or a continuation of the first, needs to be taken care of at the local levels where the local units of government have a better feel and sense of what is necessary within their communities. And then at the point, whether it's at the state level or at the local levels, government servants, elected officials, need to take a leadership position in relation to simple things like encouraging folks to continue to wear their masks, to distance, and to observe general rules of cleanliness. So much of this is a matter of leadership as opposed to mandate.
Okay, thank you, Representative Ralph. And now our next question, Representative Ralph will go first. Much has been discussed currently about prioritizing economic health and public health. How should government prioritize economic issues and public health issues?
Actually, I don't think that there is a necessity to try to juxtapose those or play those two items against each other. I think it's one of the things that we just saw in this in our initial response. Now looking in hindsight, I think there were many things that could have been done by individual businesses and economically that would have responded or as the term was used so often, businesses could have pivoted in many instances to have still continued to provide services and still maintained a healthy environment or healthy atmosphere. So I don't think it necessarily has to be an either or that we have to play those two interests off against each other at any point in time. But I think we need to, again, continue in terms of leadership to acknowledge and have a unified message to folks as to what it is they need to do, and try and stay away from the misinformation that causes people to want to branch off into their own little ideas of how we might respond. But I don't think those two necessarily need to conflict.
Time's up. Thank you, Representative Ralph. And now the same question for Mrs. Scoggins. How should government prioritize economic issues and public health issues?
Well, I pretty much agree with what Representative Ralph said. I don't think that they should really be considered, but the public health, if we do not have healthy people, we will not have a prosperous economy. So I do say that the public health must come first and do all that we can to make it happen so that as the public is having safe health and can move about the community and support the economy as best they can. I think we need to look at the public health first so that we have healthy citizens, healthy workers, and healthy communities so that we can go ahead and prosper economically and keep stores open and keep the businesses running. But we need to take care of the public health and follow the guidelines that are set forth.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Scoggins. And now our next question, and Mrs. Scoggins will go first. What should be the legislature's priorities when looking at the complex issue of rural economic development in this state?
Oh, goodness, rural economic development. I have twice been to the Prosperity Listening Tour, the Rural Opportunity Conference. We need to look at what is available to us out here in rural Kansas. We offer many things, and we had quite a list of things that were the roadblocks for Ford County. Each of these were a different sort of listening session. We have to work together. We need to make sure that our businesses are well known and that we support our local business and that we do all we can to stay in our community and use our own businesses. The legislative priorities, I would like to see us do more with rural broadband. That is essential. We are the only quadrant that does not have a 4-lane highway. We need to be working on the highway system. We need to, now my time's up.
And time's up. Thank you very much, Mrs. Scoggins. And now the same question to Representative Ralph. What should the legislature's priorities be when looking at the complex issue of rural economic development in this state?
Priorities for rural economic development would very clearly, in my mind, start with broadband. And we speak many instances or sometimes in regard to rural broadband, but actually that's an issue across the state. And many times I'll have some interesting conversations with some of my more urban counterparts that they're a little ways outside of Topeka, but they feel like they're rural or they want to talk like they're rural. But they still have some of the same issues in relation to broadband. So that's a huge item for us out here and will be critical to economic development. The next thing behind that is going to be highways and transportation. In this past session, as part of the Appropriations Committee, I voted to pass out the Ike Transportation Program that will bring many of our highway projects here in western Kansas back to the forefront and get those moving again. And at that point in time, then we just want to work at making the economic development programs that are currently available scaled to rural communities, since we're not the same as urban communities or the larger areas.
Okay, thank you, Representative Ralph. And now our next question to you. What specific policies, aside from the specific policy that you just mentioned, do you support that would advance rural economic development?
That's always an interesting question, to talk about something that you've already talked about, but try another one. Let's slide down. I'll go to rural housing, since we have spoken about economic development in relation to transportation and broadband. I'm talking about rural housing. Dodge City has been at the forefront of utilization of several of our legislative efforts in relation to supporting rural housing in our smaller or mid-sized communities. And that's significant because if we are going to be able to support workforce, increase our workforce, beyond being able to train them, you got to have some place for them to live. And it's a significant issue all around the state. But right now, the last time I heard, we have a significant a low level of housing inventory. So it's critical for us to continue to assist our rural communities in being able to support rural housing development.
Okay, thank you, Representative Ralph. And now the same question to Mrs. Scoggins. What specific policies do you support that would advance rural economic development?
Well, I would say one of the most important ones that we would need to do would be education out here in particularly Southwest Kansas. We are the only quadrant of the state that does not have a four-year university. However, I am pleased when I was a commissioner, we do have a university center that does have four-year education for the healthcare industry. But we need to have education is very important, and that's going to do most for our rural prosperity. We need to keep our students here. We need to have our education here. And with broadband, which we spoke of earlier, we've got to have better highways, which are through the IKE program, and we did talk about broadband. But education and good medical care are two things that we've got to have, and we need legislation to help us do that.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Scoggins. And now our next question to you, Mrs. Scoggins. You answer first. What specifically can the legislature do to protect and ensure the growth of small business in this state?
I think the STAR bonds are one of the things that really help us in the rural areas. We need to, again, the transportation is essential for a small business to get started. We need to focus on our highways. We've got to get our internet. All of that would be important for growing our small businesses and then supporting them within our community by being there, shopping, and supporting our local small businesses. We need to do what we can on the taxes and tax incentives for the local communities and with the STAR bond districts, things like that can come down from Topeka to the local level and get some tax incentives to help us with that, to help the small businesses come to our communities and be supportive of them by shopping there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Scoggins. And the same question for Representative Ralph. What specifically can the legislature do to protect and ensure the growth of small business in Kansas?
Being said the question is specifically related to legislative efforts, I would say that the first and foremost, getting the legislature out of the way of small business is the best thing we can do. So many times, the things going on in Topeka actually are a hindrance for our small businesses. In an effort to try and reduce unnecessary regulation, been a part of an effort through the last two sessions to try to make sure that we were not, as a legislature, pushing off into the administrative level the implementation of and drafting and implementation of regulations, and leave that with the legislature where it should be. Because I think regulation-wise, when you look at the books, we've got way too much regulation at this point in time for the purpose that it was intended to be there for.
Okay, thank you, Representative Ralph. And let's move on to our next question. Representative Ralph, you will go first. What is your opinion regarding sales tax on food and clothing in Kansas?
My opinion is the sales tax on food is too high, or even if we could get to the spot where we didn't have it, but it won't happen that we won't have a sales tax on food, but it's too high. It's not fair to the citizens in our state who are most impacted by it. And hopefully in the session to come, we will find a way to reduce the sales tax on food. It's always becomes a matter of there's a price tag to that. Any reduction in sales tax in whatever area it might be will come with some corresponding reduction in the revenues for the state. So there will be some hard work to do in that regard, but I am in favor of reducing sales tax on food to the degree that we can.
Okay, thank you, Representative Ralph. And now the same question for Mrs. Scoggins. What is your opinion regarding sales tax on food and clothing in Kansas?
I would be very supportive of reducing the tax on the food. Definitely, I would agree with Representative Ralph. We have to be very careful because that is the funding stream for our state. How a part of it anyway, our taxes. But yes, I would like us to visit reducing the sales tax on food, clothing, not necessarily. I do agree that on the food, that would be something that we need to look at and make sure that it is a workable situation for our legislature and for the tax revenue coming in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Scoggins. And now our next question. This one's from the public. What do you feel is the best thing that you have done to make Dodge City better? And this question goes to Mrs. Scoggins first.
Well, thank you for that question. I would say of the things I've done for Dodge City, it would be the Meadowlark Child Advocacy Center. This was the first one between Wichita, Kansas and Denver, Colorado. And I led that, and that was under my tenure at the Crisis Center. This was a place that was a safe environment for our children that are victims to have a good place to be able to be interviewed. It was safe. We had 3 recordings going at all times, so the children did not have to be re-interviewed. It was a wonderful environment. The Meadowlark House Child Advocacy Center is still going on, but for me to have been a part in getting that started and going in Dodge City, I would say that would be the one thing I am very proud of. I'm very pleased that it made a difference in Dodge City.
Thank you, Mrs. Scoggins. And now the same question. This one's from the public to Representative Ralph. What do you feel is the best thing that you have done to make Dodge City better?
I'm sorry, you cut out right in what is the best thing, and then it cut out. I didn't get the last half of the question.
My apologies, Representative Ralph. The question from the public. What do you feel is the best thing that you have done to make Dodge City better?
I think over the years in my law practice, I've represented most of the municipal entities, the school district, the community college, the county on occasion, the city, the area mental health center. But specifically for the community, I would say the time I spent serving on the board of the Southwest Kansas Community Foundation was the most beneficial and the most made me feel the best about the results of that. A wonderful group of folks in an incredible amount of forethought created the Community Foundation many, many years ago. And I was able to be a part of that when they took on their first full-time executive director and saw growth in the Community Foundation. I think community foundations are going to be a significant part of rural communities moving forward and bringing stability to them. And so my time serving on that committee and serving as its chair for 5 years would have to be what I feel like was the most beneficial, the most satisfying.
Okay, thank you, Representative Ralph. And we'll move on to our next question. Representative Ralph, you will go first. The Kansas Constitution ensures a high-quality public education to all children in Kansas. Are we meeting this standard? What more needs to be done?
Yes, we are meeting that standard, and in actuality, the state constitution says that we will provide suitable finance, and the Supreme Court gave their blessing, if you will, a couple of sessions ago that said, yes, in fact, we are meeting our constitutional obligation after some period of time when the legislature had not, in the estimation of the Supreme Court, had not been doing that. So the short, simple answer to the question is, yes, we are carrying out our constitutional duty to provide for the suitable finance of public education. Here locally, I'll brag for a moment. I think public education is tremendous, and particularly here in our local community, our USD 443 provides an incredible amount of opportunities for our students here. Tremendous staff within our local community. The facilities, the community support for facilities for public education has been tremendous here in Dodge City, and I'm sure we will continue that into the future. But yes, we are providing for our constitutional obligation.
Thank you, Representative Ralph. And now the same question for Mrs. Scoggins. The Kansas Constitution ensures a high-quality public education to all children in Kansas. Are we meeting this standard? What more needs to be done?
Well, I do not think we are meeting the standard. I have been endorsed by the Kansas National Education Association and the American Federation of Teachers. I think we need to make sure that we support the teachers' continuing contract law. Our population in Dodge City, it concerns me, less than 20% of our population has a post-secondary education. And we rank 82nd in the state of Kansas for a population with post-secondary education. Only 70% of our population in Ford County has a high school diploma or a GED. I do think that we need to do more for our teachers. Most definitely, everyone who is teaching at home is saying we do not pay our teachers enough. And as they're teaching at home, they're realizing the quality of teachers. I think we need to do more, and
Time's up.
I would be very supportive of it.
Time's up. Thank you, Mrs. Scoggins. And now our next question, Mrs. Scoggins will go first. COVID-19 presents a number of challenges to our public education system. What specific policies and approaches do you support that could help weather these challenges to education specifically?
Well, this goes right back to broadband and our need for it. We are having families with maybe one cell phone, and they're supposed to be doing teaching online, doing their classwork online. The COVID has really thrown a wrench in the teaching. And if you are a teacher and you have 3 students at home of your own that are needing to learn, I think we need to really revisit this and work as best we can to somehow get the students to where they are getting their education, but for them to have to also stare at a screen for several hours. This is something we need to bring the teachers into making the decisions and go forward with teachers and educators and supervisors and the families.
Time's up, Mrs. Scoggins. Time's up. Thank you very much. And now the same question for Representative Ralph. COVID-19 presents a number of challenges to our public education system. What specific policies and approaches do you support that can help weather these challenges specifically to education?
Specifically to education, this is one of those moments when it's important for an elected body, the legislature in this case, to acknowledge that every problem is not a legislative problem to be addressed. We have elected officials in this state governing our education system. We have a state board of education, we have local boards of education, and we have local community city commissions and county commissions. Every issue doesn't require a legislative decision or solution. In these instances, as I have in many other instances, I support folks who are closest to decisions, are closest to problems, that we rely upon them and we trust them to be able to address those issues. Here locally, I am completely supportive of our local board of education and how they have dealt with these issues. They see what's going on the ground, they know what's going on in their buildings, and they are best suited to be able to respond to those issues and provide the quality education that they are not only elected for, but paid for.
Time's up. Thank you, Representative Ralph. And now moving on to our next question. Representative Ralph, you will answer first. What specific policies do you support that could improve the foster care system in Kansas?
I think in this particular instance, this may actually go back to another item of the legislature's position in this is oversight. These issues come out of departments that are within the administrative branch. They are under the governor's direction with her secretaries in those instances. The oversight that the legislature can carry on in terms of whether they are those duties are carried out appropriately is appropriately done in the legislature. But in terms of the policies that are carried out, I would say that falls at the feet of the executive, the governor, and her administrative branch. the secretaries. And at that point in time, it is up to the governor to address those policies, and then for the legislature to ensure that those policies are carried out to the protection of all of those that are within our care and control.
Okay, thank you, Representative Ralph. And now the same question to Mrs. Scoggins. What specific policies do you support that could improve the foster care system in Kansas?
Well, I would like to support and see some more help for the foster care parents, those that are taking the children in. There needs to be more. We had a privatization of some of the foster care some years back that wasn't particularly successful. I think we need good oversight. We need to make sure that it's funded correctly. We need to make certain that the foster children are in a home that has been well prepared and is supported by the governor. Yes, we do have the administrative part, and the policies need to be overseen. We need it to be very transparent what is going on, how the children are being treated, and all aspects of the foster care program. It is a very hard job to be a foster parent. It's hard for the children to be a foster child. We need to do what we can to make sure that these children are treated properly and carefully in our system. Yes, we need the oversight on that.
Thank you, Mrs. Scoggins. And now, final two questions. These are hypothetical undecided voters. I'm going to describe this hypothetical undecided voter to you, and I want you to specifically respond as to why this person should be voting for you. This undecided voter is a single mother of 3 children who works 2 jobs and takes classes at a local community college with hopes of working in the medical care industry. Why should this undecided hypothetical voter vote for you? Mrs. Scoggins, you go first.
Well, my heart bleeds for her. And yes, I have been there. I have been a single mother. I held down some jobs, 2 jobs while I was rearing a child. I understand where we're coming from. I would be very supportive of doing all we can to help the single mother with her children. To provide, I think we need to be better with our food stamps. We need to do all we can to help a single parent be a single mother. But holding down 2 jobs, what do we have in child care for these children? Where are they staying? What is happening to the children? We need to somehow set up some sort of policy, and I would be very willing to work with all people to set up something so that this mother is not having to hold down 2 jobs and that she is there with her children. And we need to have affordable child care that is dependable. I would work with her. I would listen to her. I would listen to every question she has, and I would value her opinion.
Thank you, Mrs. Scoggins. And now the same hypothetical undecided voter to you, Representative Ralph. This undecided voter is a single mother of 3 who works 2 jobs and takes classes at a local community college with hopes of working in the medical care industry. Why should this undecided voter cast their ballot for you?
Very specifically and directly, I would tell her she needs to vote for me because, number one, I support Medicaid expansion and will do what I can to get that passed through the Kansas legislature, which would be a tremendous benefit for her, not only in the long term in relation to the employment that she seeks, but also for her children as a single mother working 2 jobs. I would also tell her that I'm working very hard to maintain all levels and modes of transportation into our rural communities. For someone who is strapped for money, maintaining our Amtrak service, maintaining our essential air service, and maintaining our highways is incredibly important for a family in that regard. And finally, I would tell her that at the moment and for the last couple of years, Senator Estes and I have continued to work on bringing the University Center to Dodge City. The University Center will bring those classes closer to her to allow her the opportunity to be able to get the training and then find jobs in the medical field. So those 3 items are right in my wheelhouse, and I will bring those home for her.
Thank you, Representative Ralph. And now our next hypothetical undecided voter is a small business owner with 6 full-time employees and would like to provide more benefits to their workers but cannot. Why should this undecided voter cast a ballot for you, Representative Ralph?
I think in those instances, sometimes the most important thing that we can do in relation to some of our constituents is let them know or advise them when there are things that government is not going to be able to do or provide for them, specifically in relation to the question that you're asking, where a business wants to provide more benefits. That's a tremendous idea, and I would support that in every aspect. The things that I can do, again, going back to, I can reduce regulation, I can reduce the imposition of government on that business to allow them to be able to thrive in whatever fashion is appropriate for the level of business that they're providing, or services that they are providing anyway. So as much as anything, what I need to do for those small businesses is get out of their way and allow them to operate. For example, I would tell them, one of the things I'm not going to do through this current situation is I'm not going to shut them down in a blanket overall situation in regard to the virus, as long as they can provide protection to their employees and to their customers.
Thank you, Representative Ralph. And now the same hypothetical undecided voter to you, Mrs. Scoggins, is a small business owner with 6 full-time employees and would like to provide more benefits to their workers but cannot. Why should this undecided voter cast a ballot for you, Mrs. Scoggins?
Well, I would do all I could to support this small business owner and work with them again on local tax incentives, do some other things that might help them work with their business and their overall income, so that they could help the employees, the 6 employees that they want to provide more benefits for. I would like to see them bring the employees in as a discussion and see how they could work on ways to all work together to make the business grow and do better. Again, this would be something that, living locally and being here, you need to be able to support the small business and do all we can to make sure that they are able to keep growing and doing and helping. I think we need to make sure that legislation is proper and safety is there. But no, we need to support our small business in every way possible. I would be there for them.
Time's up. Thank you, Mrs. Scoggins. And that is it for the questions, the direct questions we have. We're now going to move to closing statements. Again, each candidate will have a 90-second closing statement. And since we had Mrs. Scoggins go first in the opening statement, let's have Representative Ralph go first in the closing statement. Representative Ralph?
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank Smoky Hills Public Television, and Dr. Steinmetz, I'd like to thank you as well for the opportunity to present this information to the residents of District 119. This is a service to all of Central and Western Kansas, and I commend the public service, or the public broadcasting system, for their efforts. I would also like to thank all of those who have tuned in for taking an interest in participating in your own governance. I have used the past 4 legislative sessions to not only bring Dodge City and Western Kansas more voice to the legislative process, but to also listen and foster relationships across issues, geographic locations. As we work to stabilize our population in rural Kansas, we must concentrate on making use of every bit of legislative clout we can muster. That effort requires retaining strong, experienced, and trusted voices in the State House. I've been that voice in Topeka, and I ask that you send me back to continue to shepherd and advance the interests of Western Kansas in the Kansas House of Representatives. These times we live in make it all the more important to continue strong and steady leadership from leaders who have already shown that they have your interests at heart, are thoughtful and deliberate, and have demonstrated that their voice will be heard. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Representative Ralph. And now for your closing statement, Mrs. Scoggins.
Thank you very much. And again, I want to thank each of you for taking time from your very busy schedule to attend this forum and this candidate time together. I want to thank Les Kinderknecht and all of the staff at Smoky Hills Public Television for being a part of this opportunity to share our thoughts with you. You've heard the answers to the questions. You are all very well aware that I have served our community of Dodge City in many, many ways, from being the executive director of the Crisis Center, taking care of the sexual assault and domestic violence victims, to leading the way for the Meadowlark House Child Advocacy Center, to work with nursing home residents. I have served everyone in our community in every different walk of life. I have listened to you. I've been a city commissioner. In listening to you, I've responded by doing what you've asked. I have made a very positive difference in Dodge City. It is truly an honor to be a candidate for the House of Representatives of the 119th District. You can count on me to be your voice. I do listen and I respond. And I thank you again. I ask everyone to please stay in touch and let us know what you think, because I value your opinion. Thank you again, and I will look forward to your vote.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mrs. Scoggins. And that concludes our live debate for the 119th District of the Kansas House of Representatives. I'm Dr. Jay Steinmetz. Good evening, and be sure to vote.
Thank you.
Sunflower Electric Power Corporation, cooperative members working together to generate power so you can enjoy the benefits of life in central and western Kansas. Sunflower Electric Power Corporation, energy done right.